Hello and welcome to Overtime Hockey Talk. My name is Mark Paul. My co-host Justin Baker and I are on the precipice of ranking the top 10 best contracts in the NHL as we start this edition of OT Hockey Talk. Justin, how's it going? I feel like it's been a minute. I've taken a vacation. You're just working away. I don't know. Have you done anything fun lately, or are you just power washing your house?
Yeah, just a little power wash. I cut down a few trees last
that's
week,
fun.
too, so that was fun. Yeah, bought a chainsaw and cut down a few trees.
Sweet.
Enjoyed that.
Yeah, that's always a good time. Cutting down a tree where there's it's pure rough cut. Just go ham and take some aggression out on a tree. It's pretty fun. How wide are we talking? Are we talking like some big thick ones, or a bunch of little ones?
Yeah, like 6-8 inches at the most. So
okay.
Some tiny guys.
See, but you got some for the old fireplace. Do you have a fireplace in your house? I don't think you do.
We got a fire pit.
A fire pit.
No
okay,
fireplace.
Fire pit.
Yes.
The same thing. We're in Michigan. You can use a fire pit anytime. You can have for some reason only in Michigan though. You can have a bonfire when it's 85 degrees outside.
Yeah, it's funny. So we're so as you know, I'm sure the two listeners we have probably don't know this, but so I'm selling my house right now. And we had to get a certificate of occupancy over here from the city, and so the guy that came over with, he looked at our fire pit, and apparently, so the guy who owned it before us, he just basically dug a hole, put a bunch of blocks, concrete, whatever you want to call it, around, and basically made this makeshift fire pit. Right? Didn't go out and buy one from Home Depot or anything like that. So we legit had this guy over to inspect the house for the C of O. He comes over, looks at that, and he's just like, that's a flower bed, right? I'm like, sorry, what? A flower bed? He's like, yeah, just make sure you put a potted flower in there before I come back for the second inspection. So
you have to get a certificate of occupancy before you sell your house?
Yeah, I mean, technically you don't have to. Sometimes I see them online where you can, that the buyer has to get the C of O, but basically you have to get it before you can.
Weird.
Yeah, I guess
we never had to do that.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's a Garden City thing, but
I think it probably is a Garden. Because Livonia, no, I've never heard of anybody having to do that. That's interesting.
Yeah, weird.
Yeah, we didn't have to have anything. Well, anyways, as much as we'll start a real estate podcast next.
There you go.
But we'll stick to hockey. We'll stick to what we know. I'm really excited for today's show because there are some fantastic contracts out there. There are also some really terrible ones that I'm sure maybe get mentioned throughout the episode in comparisons for some things. This is a really interesting list because you have some. I mean, I don't know about your list, but I have some really great players on this list. And maybe some of the players who appear here will surprise people because you're thinking best contracts. You're almost thinking like who's the best bargain, right? Like pretty similar, probably could interchangeable title for this episode, best bargains. And even so, the best bargains, as far as I can tell, are still some fantastic players. And so I'm excited to dive into this and look at your list. And so I guess with that said, how did you determine who would make your list? What were some of your factors?
Yeah. So first off, like entry level deals, threw them out the window, right? Because obviously you could look at a guy like, now again, guys that have signed contract extensions, I did take that into account too. But for instance, like when you look at a guy over the last couple of years, like Cale Makar, right? As far as bargain is concerned, I mean, it's through the roof. Right?
Yeah, and you're you don't have a choice. That's the contract you have to sign in the beginning. So it's not like you got a particularly better deal than someone else would have gotten on a player of similar caliber in his first 3 years.
Exactly. So threw that one right out the window, and basically, a lot of, I guess I would say, arbitration type deals I threw out the window as well, because a lot of times it's basically that, players and players and teams, they basically go in low ball, high ball, and then they just end up somewhere in the middle. So it's not really true negotiating, in my opinion. But so I did take that into account when looking at some player deals. Now, luckily for me, none of the people on my list actually had arbitration type contracts. But as far as production's concerned, I also looked at, again, what kind of points are you producing, what the cost per point is, also what they mean to the team, right? So because you could have a player who basically doesn't really produce a lot, like a Brett Pesce, for example, but he means so much to that team where he is just a rock solid defenseman back there. So he could have made the list just because of that. So
very true.
Again, yeah, some of the things I took into account. And then, of course, too, you can look at guys and just think, okay, cool, this guy's, putting up 100 points and he's getting paid $10 million, but this guy putting up 100 points is only getting paid $6 million. So, that weighs into it too.
Okay. I like it. I definitely, I used some of of course, the fancy stats and like what a certain player, how many wins a certain player brings to the table. That definitely, there's the formula to determine how many wins that particular player brings about per year or, over the length of the contract. That factored in. There's, of course, plenty of lists out there where you can find, different people's measurements for how they determine some of these. I kind of went through a bunch of those lists. I made my own order and also went beyond maybe what, this guy had a really good year and his contract was low. Okay. But like, what difference did he make as not just in the regular season, but also in the playoffs, which does, adjust some things, because when you're talking playoffs, you got Austin Matthews, you have Mitchell Marner and Connor McDavid, and three of the highest paid players in the league who are, in terms of the amount of points that they had, probably about where they should be paid in terms of their regular season contribution. But then when you go to the playoffs and you see what they've been able to do in the playoffs, I think you have to weigh that towards what they ultimately bring as a whole, and not just, well, they do really well in the regular season and that's really what they're being paid for. No, they're being paid because you hope that they can do what they do in the regular season, at least to some extent in the playoffs, and there really hasn't been much to that extent. So that factored in as well. Well, with that said, shall we jump right into your number 10, or do you have any just missed your list kind of guys?
Yeah, you know what? I do actually have one just missed that I put on there, and that is Mark Scheifele from the Winnipeg Jets.
Okay, yeah, Mark Scheifele. It's a good.
Yeah, a guy who easily could be, in the top 5 I've seen on a few lists. I mean, if you look at what he's getting paid, roughly, $6 million to be a number 1 center in the NHL, and just literally what he brings to that team. And you saw when he wasn't there in the lineup in the playoffs, how dysfunctional that team was and how, lackluster they look. So at 6.125 for another 3 years, they're getting just such good value out of a guy who can put up a point per game.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, more than a point per game player. I mean, he was on pace for like 90 points again. So definitely it's sad. Some of these guys, like Mark Scheifele, I'd say is like probably at the end of his prime. Like he's got another year or two of this high level, but it's sad the last 2 seasons have kind of been very shortened. And so you're not going to see those guys get to their full potential. But at the same time, so players have had lockouts and plenty of other things to deal with over the years. So there's all sorts of potential things that get in the way there. But let's go to your number 10. I didn't have any just missed my list. I just started right out. So let's go your number 10.
Yeah, number 10 was a guy who I actually looked at and weighed more heavily on the fact of what he means to his team, and that's Mackenzie Weegar. Might be a bit of a shocker, for some people to see his name hit the list, but that's why I love these. They are subjective, and I'm sure you and I are going to have very different lists, but Mackenzie Weegar from the Florida Panthers, 27-year-old, playing top-line minutes on defense alongside Aaron Ekblad at $3.25 million for a top 2 defenseman, in my opinion. This guy could easily go on just about any team in the NHL and be a top 2, maybe number 3 defenseman. If you look at his stats, what was crazy to me, and I didn't even realize, I mean, one, he is up there as far as points, cost per point. He is up there with some of the best. I mean, literally cost per point for a guy like him is only $90,000 per point, which is phenomenal when you look at a guy like, for example, looking at Jacob Verana right on my Detroit Red Wings, $93,000 a point. So there's another really good deal. But Beyond that, what this guy means defensively to the Florida Panthers, let alone the good production he brings offensively. He actually started this year 60% of his draws in the defensive zone. Last year, 57% in the defensive zone. So this guy is supposed to be a defensive player who just somehow managed to find an offensive game over the last couple of years, and he just has been, helping carry that back end when you look outside of Aaron, Ekblad.
Yeah, well, yeah, and what was Keith Yandel beforehand, who was putting up some good points too. Well, I'm sticking. I like that pick. I did not consider Mackenzie Weegar at all. So I love it because there's so many options here, and there's so many potential areas of a game that aren't as quantifiable as others. Like forwards are a little bit easier, I think, to do this list than defensemen, because you have all right. Hey, like to a certain extent, how many goals you score and how many you help to put into the net plays a huge factor in how much you're going to get paid. So if you're not doing either one of those, you're probably not that effective, and therefore you're not going to get paid, or your salary, your contract is not going to be seen as a high bargain. For which I am going with my number 10, another Florida Panther, mind you, but maybe you have him higher on your list. But I'm going Carter Verhaeghe.
Ooh.
Now I know he has 1 year left on his deal, his current deal at $1 million. He signed a 2-year, $2 million deal, $1 million cap hit for Carter Verhaeghe, and his extension at $4.1 million for 3 years. I think it caught some people going, whoa, wow, you're like really paying Verhaeghe off of one shortened season. Granted, a season where he was on pace for 69 points. And if you look at other players that are putting up 69 points, I mean, that's, for all intents and purposes, that's at least a $7 million player. If over the course of an 82 game season, he put up 69 points regularly. But he did this one time. He went from like barely a fourth line player with the Tampa Bay Lightning to playing with Barkov, playing with some really, really great players. And I think that definitely helped him. But at the same time, when he was separated from other talent, he still did pretty well. So I got to put him on this list. He may not end up being a guy who's going to put up 69 points. But even at $4.1 million, the way that he played this year, do I think that he is capable of putting up 45 to 50 for the next 3 to 4 years? I do. I think that he is capable of that, and especially with this $1 million deal. I mean, cost per point last year, $27,000 a point. And cost per goal, $55,555, which is second in the league only to Connor Sheary, who was at $52,000 a goal. So, and he had by far the most goals out of anybody in that top stretch. So, I got to give it to Carter Verhaeghe at number 10.
I love it. All right, beautiful.
All right, let's go number 9. Who do you have?
All right, from the St. Louis Blues, left winger David Perron. This guy, to me, is probably someone who's slid under the radar as far as, underrated players are concerned. I mean, at $4 million, David Perron has been, just a steal for the Blues, especially considering the fact that he's essentially been, over the last, of course, last year put up over a point per game, on pace for essentially, an 85 to 90 point season. But last year, 60 points in 71 games. Year before, 46 and 57. Year before that with, Vegas, he had 66 points in 70 games. So he's almost nearing a point per game pace over the last 4 seasons. And he's doing that, especially in St. Louis over the last 3, in a situation where he doesn't have true elite playmaking centers. So, yes, Braden Shin and Ryan O'Reilly are fantastic centers, but these are guys who are, more well-rounded for their defensive aspects and their ability to check and, play both ends of the ice versus their true playmaking ability, like your Nathan McKinnons and Connor McDavid's or what have you. So to be able to, outpace, their centerman on the wing like that, is rather impressive, and only getting paid $4 million to me is fantastic. And the stat that stood out the most for me that made me want to put him on the list was when I look at point per game per 60 minutes, he finished 13th in the league ahead of guys like Alexander Barkov, Sidney Crosby, Mitch Marner. And so to be able to do that with the limited amount of ice time he gets is just phenomenal for me at $4 million.
Okay. Yeah, I like it. Didn't have David Perron on my list either, so it's just, I love it. It's very rare when we have lists where we're very different. So I enjoy it. My number 9 is the first of 3 players from this team that will appear on my list. And the first is Samuel Girard, defenseman for the Colorado Avalanche. Another 6 years at $5 million, and he's a number 1 defenseman. In pretty much every single statistic that you can find, he is up there with other number 1 defensemen. And I mean, 32 points in 48 games. You're talking about somebody who's on pace for a 50-point season as a defenseman. They're getting $5 million. He's getting $5 million, and that's $5 million for the next 6 years. Like, by the end of that deal, he'll be 29 years old, and that deal will look unbelievable. Like, that deal is going to be, it's going to be one of those deals that you go, holy crap! Like, that's Matthias Ekholm kind of holy crap. Like, what was Matthias Ekholm making? Like $3.5 million,
right?
Forever. It's he's still making $3.5 million, right? And even now, when Matthias Ekholm is dipping, it still looks great. Like, those are the kind of deals that you want, because you don't want at the end of the deal, like a lot of deals, where you go, well, we're overpaying that guy now, but that's what we had to do in order to get him during his prime. Like, you don't have to do that with Samuel Girard. He's going to be still incredibly effective and likely still at number 1 defenseman type numbers at the end of that deal. And in 6 years, 2026, 27 season, I wonder, like, who's making $15 million a year at that point? Like, Connor McDavid's probably going to be making close to $15 million a year. And Samuel Girard, a number 1 defenseman, will be making $10 million a year less than that. So I love that deal. And Samuel Girard is kind of the, like, yes, Cale Makar is the guy there, but Cale Makar isn't Cale Makar without Samuel Girard.
No, I agree. Just like, I mean, I look at a guy like Quinn Hughes in Vancouver, right? And you look at how good he was when he had that defensive partner there that flew off to Calgary and Nate Schmidt. And so, he's just not the same without him. And so I think Cale Makar is in a similar situation that he flourishes because of a guy like Samuel Girard.
Well, yeah, and I mean, what defenseman isn't going to flourish from playing with another really good defenseman? I mean,
right,
yes,
exactly.
Yes, Victor Hedman is fantastic, but look at the other defensemen that he has on his team. Not even necessarily that he's playing with Ryan McDonagh, but the fact that there's Ryan McDonagh that gets to go out on the ice instead of him. You know, you're not having to be out on the ice all the time, so you don't have to play quite as much as maybe a guy who's on a team where there's just nothing else behind him. And so
right.
And not to mention, hey, you know, who you get to play with certainly has a big factor, especially who you get to pass the puck to up front. That always helps too. I imagine that there's at least one Colorado Avalanche on your list, so I'll await when we hear that name. Number 8, who do you have?
Yeah, I'm going to stick with defensemen here. I got quite a few of them early on my list here, but at number 8, I have Shea Theodore from the Vegas Golden Knights coming in at number 8 for me. I mean, this guy, what's not to be said? I mean, I've been thinking for the last couple of years since he pretty much came out of Vegas that first year that he was going to be a Norris candidate here pretty soon. And last 2 seasons, he's finished 6th in Norris voting. So I think it's only a matter of time before a guy like him, gets up there as far as, votes go. But I mean, listen, this year on pace for 65 points over an 82-game stretch. So phenomenal production from an offensive standpoint. But then you look at what he's able to do as far as possession numbers are concerned, coming in, at $5.2 million This guy is a real bargain. I mean, his Corsi has been over 60% for the last 3 seasons. And you think, too, I thought, okay, great. Alex Pietrangelo comes in. He's going to steal a lot of minutes from Shea Theodore. But really, that wasn't the case. He was still playing the same consistent minutes, same consistent offense and defensive zone starts. So this guy, essentially, his role didn't change. He didn't really have to do anything different this year other than continue to be his normal self. And listen, at $5 million for a guy who is, in my opinion, considered a top 10 defenseman in this league is quite a bargain when you look at what some teams like the New Jersey Devils and Edmonton Oilers just paid out for some of their top defensemen. I mean, gosh, you're paying half that for more production and better defensive zone starts. I mean, steal.
Absolutely, and the fact that deal goes to 2024-25, like,
right.
I mean, it's going to go right through his prime, 30 years old, and it's done. And then you could bring him back, or you could not, and you're fine. That's again not a deal that's going to look bad in 4 years. And
absolutely,
and that's he's number 7 on my list. So it's not surprising that he appeared here on your list either. We're finally matching up here on one of them. The other thing about Shea Theodore and his deal was, and I think before Pietrangelo signed, the reason they could do a deal like they did for Pietrangelo at $8.8 million a year was because they had such a good deal for Shea Theodore. Like, if they had even had a couple million higher, where it probably should be, it should probably at least be in the like 7.5, 8 million range. And if it had been that, no Pietrangelo. So it makes that deal even sweeter, the fact that because of his great bargain deal, they're able to bring in a better defenseman, which in turn makes him even better.
Absolutely.
So there's lots and lots of reasons to love that deal. My number 7, or I'm sorry, my number 8. I said Theodore's my 7. My number 8, I did have one entry level deal because it's not even fair. How is it fair to have Adam Fox still on an entry level deal? Like, it's ridiculous.
I don't hate it. I mean, the guy is. I mean, look, Norris winner.
He
right?
won the Norris Trophy.
Yeah. How many guys?
He's
can
what
say that
the second defenseman in NHL history to win the award before starting their 3rd NHL season. I
wow.
think the other one has got to be Bobby Orr, right?
You would think so. I'm going to look that up right now.
Yeah, I saw it. I saw it somewhere that he was the second one, but I don't think the article actually said who it was. So.
Yeah, Bobby Orr won 2 by his 3rd season.
Yeah, of course he did. Unreal. So I mean, how can I not include a guy who? Hey, let's and it's. I don't think that he has, as far as I know, when he signed that deal, I don't think that he has huge bonuses available to himself. I guess he has $850,000 in bonuses that he can hit. So, I mean, the most that his cap hit becomes is still pretty minimal, like another 1.775, I think, with bonuses. So, I mean, that's just an unbelievable deal for a guy who wins the Norris. I mean, it's crazy to think how, even 2019-20 season, he had a really nice, like a really great year. I mean, 42 points in 70 games. And that was, of course, his coming out of Harvard and showing up and being really on that second pairing. And then 2021 season just takes off 47 points in 55 games. And I mean, when he was on the ice, the Rangers were in such a great position. Even without Panarin for a while, he looked fantastic, and he was their best player. And with Panarin on that team, with how much Panarin's making, I mean, it allows them to do so much. And it's kind of surprising in some ways that maybe they haven't made more moves to try and go, well, we could capitalize on this. I know they brought in Barclay Goodrow, but I know they're crossing their fingers that Lafreniere is the Adam Fox of last year. Like, can he find himself and appear on this next list next year where you go, we can't keep him off this even though it's his entry-level deal. It's not even fair. Your first overall pick and really your second overall pick haven't been as unreal as you maybe would hope. So the Rangers in an interesting position there. But anyways, Adam Fox, my number 8. I said Theodore was my 7. Who's your number 7?
Yeah, number 7. I'm still sticking with defensemen here, and I got to go Victor Hedman.
You love those defensemen.
I do. I mean, they just, when you find the right one, man, they just bring such good value. But yeah, I mean, this guy, honestly, there's not a lot that really needs to be said. Everybody knows how good he is. But when I look at, for example, the fact that he's considered, in my opinion, the best defenseman in the NHL, and even if you don't think of him that way, you got to easily put him in top 3, top 4 conversation without a doubt. But his contract is actually the 14th highest paid defenseman contract in the NHL right now. I mean, he's got guys above him like Jacob Trouba, John Carlson, Dougie Hamilton, PK Subban, and you look at the production those guys give you on both ends, offensively and defensively, and you compare that to a guy like Victor Hedman, who is essentially in the Norris race every single year. Not to mention that it's been that way for the last 4 or 5 years of his contract, and he's still got more years to go. This guy is just a home run as far as value goes for me. And, I mean, granted, Florida did kind of get a handicap because they don't have state tax, so they probably, were able to talk him out of another $1.5 million at the time of the signing, but still, I mean, this is, that's just Steve Yzerman for you right there. But just tremendous value as far as defensemen go. I mean, he tops the list for me all the way.
Okay. It's hard. This is the point in my list where the dollar amount is, some of these are like, oh yeah, I totally understand. I mean, that guy's way underpaid. And some of it is like, holy crap, that guy's paid a lot of money, but he's so damn good that like even 2 players can't make up what he makes up. So there has to be some kind of like, hey, really great players are still underpaid because of how freaking good they are. And that's Victor Hedman right there. I actually don't have Hedman on my list, but totally commendable, like totally fine to have him on this list. I think there's probably quite a few Tampa Bay Lightning players that could appear on this list. But my number 6 is actually the second highest paid player in the NHL.
Okay.
And that is Austin Matthews is my number 6.
I was waiting to hear his name on your list. All right.
I mean, it's hard to argue the fact that, I mean, as far as what a player contributes to his team winning games throughout the year, Matthews is one of the highest in the league. I think he's second to Connor McDavid. He's like 5.1 wins just by himself, which is an incredibly high number for one player. I think Connor McDavid comes in a little bit higher, but he's Connor McDavid. It's just not fair. But Matthews' deal, I don't think is as good as his, but I do think that it's still fantastic. $11.6 million, and when you look at the contract that Sidney Crosby had when he first signed his like $8.7 million deal. Remember when he was really in his prime when he signed that first time, and his deal was a huge percentage of the cap. I think it was like 17.3% of the cap when he first signed that deal. And then the next deal was 14.5%. And you look at Austin Matthews, and Austin Matthews is like, oh shoot, I had it here. Now I forget. I got to look it up. But Austin Matthews is less than that. I think it's 11% of the cap, something like that. Where are we here? Sorry, 14.3. It's 14.3. My bad. So 14.3 of the cap. So it's the same deal as Sidney Crosby. A slight 0.2% less of the cap from the second deal. That was Crosby's second deal, his 12-year deal that he signed. But his 5-year deal, the one that he signed out of his entry-level deal, that was 17% of the cap.
Wow.
And And you're looking at, if you go, who do you want, Matthews or Crosby? I think that based on Crosby's playoff record, it's Crosby at this point. Granted, Matthews is still very young. He's been in the league for 5 years now. I think that the bill's still out on whether or not Matthews will be a good playoff producer, because anything can happen. Alex Ovechkin, it took him a little while, and then bam, there he was in winning a cup. So it can just be kind of random too. But I look at what Austin Matthews can do, his percentage of the cap, and how stinking good he is, especially when you consider the fact that his specialty is just straight scoring goals. And if you can score goals, that is the hardest thing to do in this league, and he does it better than anybody else. So he easily, I think, could be paid. I don't think that he would be overpaid if he was paid $14 million a year. He could just as easily be paid at the very top. Like, I think the max is 16 something million. And I think that him, Sidney Crosby, Leon Draisaitl, there's several players that could be paid that much, and they still would be underpaid based on what they do.
Yeah, to me, goals alone would just make his contract worth it, right? If he went out there and literally put up 0 assists but still scored 40 goals, I would say, fine, I'm totally okay with that contract. So let alone to get another 25 points from assist right there, fine with me. And not to mention, too, I mean, yes, he does need to work on a little bit of the defensive side of his game, but you keep scoring goals like this, I will turn a blind eye to that all day long.
Right. Yes. Okay, who's your number 6?
All right, number 6, you kind of mentioned him there in your discussion, but I will go into it. Sidney Crosby, for me, comes in at number 6. Okay. Again, I think early on in that contract, that $8.7 million cap hit, again, maybe would have qualified him for this list, maybe not as high, but for me, coming in, doing what he still does, I mean, listen, the last 4 seasons, I mean, honestly, he's never had a season with less than a point per game. And so to keep continuously doing that at his age at 33, finished 4th in Hart Trophy voting this year. I mean, look, Jake Gensel is a product of Sidney Crosby, and don't get me wrong, Jake Gensel is a fantastic forward and could easily probably make, a list here or there as far as best contracts are concerned. But to me, he's not even in that conversation if he doesn't play with Sidney Crosby, because of what he does both defensively and offensively. He is just so talented. I mean, gosh, I wish right now we had Sidney Crosby, McDavid, and Pavel Datsyuk in their primes just to watch these 3, just legends go at it. Would be amazing for me right now. But obviously we're still talking about Sidney Crosby being one of the best players in the world. I think he's easily in that top 5 conversation without blinking an eye.
I totally agree. I have him actually as my number 2. So I
wonderful.
Think he's that good at $8.7 million. I mean, I'll take that guy. Now, as that contract continues to age, I mean, I think his deal ends in 2024-25. Is it going to, the only thing that you could argue really is, well, maybe that deal doesn't look as good that year. And so, given best contracts, we'd like the contract to look good throughout the whole entire time. But I don't know that he slows down. I think that
I don't think so either.
He is going to be one of, we're talking top 15 players in the NHL until he goes, you know what? I'm good. I'm out. I don't see Sidney Crosby going, yeah, I'll be a 4th line role player. I don't see it happening. Because I think that he could be like a Chara, where he goes, oh, I'm going to play forever and I'm still going to be really, really good. I'm still going to be a first line player, maybe not the best in the league anymore, but a first line player, yes. Is he always going to be better than Ryan Johansson? Yes. Always. Even at 45 years old, I think he would be better than Ryan Johansson at 30. That's just how. So therefore, he's a top line player. So he's my number 2, a little bit higher up the list, and maybe I'll dive into a little bit more why I have him so much higher once we get to our number 2s. So he was your number 6?
Yep.
Okay. Who's your number 5? Who do you got?
Number 5, I have David Pastrnak from the Boston Bruins.
Pasta.
I know.
Yep.
Yeah, a lot of people are going to talk about Brad Marchand's contract and, what a value that is. But to me, I mean, I've said this time and time again on the show, but if you look at the numbers when Pasta came in to the Bruins and formed that top line with Bergeron and Marchand, their numbers exploded because of this guy. And I think David Pastrnak is the force that drives that line to be so productive offensively. Now, Bergeron is definitely the force that drives it to be so good defensively to where they control the puck. But again, when you have a guy like this who is able and capable of scoring 1,000 goals like he is, I mean, this guy, to me, he's right behind Ovi, Matthews as far as, and maybe even McDavid as far as best goal scorers in a league goal. I think this guy's right up there with, in the best top five. Honestly, if he played with a true playmaking center, like a Nathan McKinnon, this guy would easily put up 50 goals every year, no problem. I mean, last year he put up 48.
Right.
I mean, in a 70-game season, that was phenomenal production. And, I mean, there's a reason why he won the Richard Rocket Trophy last year, and I think he's more than capable of continuing that type of production.
2 years ago. Don't take it away from
Matthews. 2 seasons ago. Sorry, not last year. Sorry.
Well, take it away from my boy.
Yeah, and, again, I still think that, again, he's the force that drives that line, and he's going to continue to drive any offense for Boston for the next, however many years. And at $6.66 million for 2 more seasons, you're getting quite a steal, because I know once he renegotiates, he's going to be up there in that $10+ million range.
I agree. And you have Pastrnak at number 5. I have Marchand at number 5, but I also have Bergeron at number 5, and I have Pastrnak at number 5. I just cheated. I was just like, how do I
love it.
I don't know how to value these players separate from each other. I don't. So to me, they just kind of go hand in hand. They've all given each other success. I'd say outside of Patrice Bergeron, by himself is phenomenal. Defensively and could potentially win the Selke every single year, no matter who he plays with. But those 3 together, I mean, at this point, you just can't separate what they're able to do together. And as a line, they're paid just over $19 million a year. I mean, you look at what the McKinnon when you have Matthews and Marner out on the ice. Well, there's over $20 million just between 2 players.
Right.
And that line of three fantastic players. It's nice, hey, Marner, Matthews, and maybe Hyman up there. Or obviously there's going to be a third guy to every line. And for the Leafs at this point, it looks like that guy's going to be, whoever gets up there is going to probably be somebody who's making $2 million a year. So yeah, okay, you're going to tack that onto the total too. But that third guy is irrelevant almost who you put with those 2. They're going to do their thing, and somebody's going to get dragged along and hopefully be somewhat effective. But these 3 guys, they're all effective. They're all fantastic. They could all drive their own line, but they happen to all play together, so I don't know how to separate them. So I'm just putting them in at number 5 because they are, as far as a line goes, they are the best value line in the NHL.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that at all.
No doubt about that.
Although I could maybe reckon that my 2 players here tied at number 4 might compete with that.
Oh, you got 2 players tied at number 4. I'm excited.
Yeah. I mean, and again, maybe I could cheat and do a Mark Paul here and put him in at 1 number, but I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. I think these guys are definitely 2 separate entities because I've watched them play without each other on different lines, and they still manage to produce. So, yeah.
Are we talking about Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Actually, I don't have both of those guys on my list, although I do have one up here.
Okay.
But tied at number 4 for me is Sasha Barkov and Jonathan Huberdeau.
Oh, okay. I don't have either of them on my list, so
I am thoroughly disappointed.
Well, Barkov's deal is almost done.
Sure, yeah.
Oh.
But during the course of that deal at $5.9 million has been an absolute steal. Absolutely. I mean, there's a reason. Okay, listen, the guy has been the most underrated player in the NHL for the last, seems like, decades since he walked into this league. But, I mean, the guy is a force to be reckoned with as far as the ability to play so good offensively and defensively, at both ends of the ice. I think if there's anybody who, again, I don't know if there's anybody in the league that plays at both ends of the ice as good as this guy does. in my opinion. Now, again, McDavid kills everybody offensively.
Well, McDavid doesn't have to play defense because he just always has the puck.
Right, exactly.
It's not
right. So a guy like Barkov is so valuable if you look at what he's able to do at both ends of the ice. Now, Jonathan Huberdeau, I mean, again, even without Barkov there, because we do know he has some injury issues before. I mean, he's missed some time, but I mean, this guy still manages to put up just some phenomenal numbers again, and he can do it just about with anybody at center. He is a line driver, much like Patrick Kane is, except he's not getting paid $10 million, right? I mean, he's only getting paid, that $5 million range. And so, at $5.9 million, obviously his extension is going to come in next season, but, it's definitely going to depend on what Barkov. I feel like both these guys are going to basically pull a Kane and Taves where they're going to get the same contract.
Barkov is 3 years younger, so that'll probably factor in a little bit, but
yeah, I mean, so the term might not be the same for sure.
You got to think they're going to both get more than Sam Reinhart, who it's so funny
right.
to see Sam Reinhart is making more money than Barkov.
Right. Aaron Ekblad is the highest paid guy. I mean, outside of, Bobrovsky, he's the highest paid skater on that team. And so that cracks me up right there. I mean, you look at what these guys do, and there's a reason why I watch TSN and I look at, who they're projecting for their Canadian Olympic rosters, right? And so you got McDavid and McKinnon up there on their top line, but who's their left winger? Jonathan Huberdeau, right? That's who they project to be next to this guy just because of how good he is. He's got the speed, he's got the playmaking ability, and he can score goals. This guy is effectively a 25 to 30 goal scorer every year without, with or without Barkov there. He can still do it.
All right. I agree. Yeah, I mean, those guys are worthy of being on this list. I don't have them on mine, but certainly they're incredibly effective players. I'm curious to see what their next deal looks like. That'll be the tell. Can they get them to another team friendly deal? I don't know if they can do it. We'll see.
I mean, hey, I think they're going to look across the street and look at Tampa Bay, and they're going to look at Braden Point and Kucherov and say, we want those deals right there. And I think at $9.5 million with no state tax, that's $11-12 million deals right there. So
see, I've heard from like a couple different places that that doesn't really have that big of a factor, because if a player does it right, they can basically avoid what would be the state tax amount, and they can shuffle money. I don't, their earnings to different years, something where they can essentially make that money back. If they have the right person, the right financial advisor, they can, which almost anyone in the NHL should be able to afford a decent financial advisor. Right. So I wonder how much that really is just like kind of played up as like, oh, well, see, that's why we can't get these guys to sign for the same amount, because they don't have state tax. But then you look at like Texas doesn't have state tax either, and they didn't get Jamie Benn on a team friendly deal. So it's not like, yeah, there's no sales. There's, he wasn't taking a big dip there to sign in Dallas. I think it's the organization. Like, people are willing to go, yeah, that's fine. I'll leave $1 million, $2 million on the table to be able to play for a great play. I mean, you think about even just for ourselves. I mean, if you're working at a company that treats you really well, they pay you, you're getting paid what you deserve. If it was 5% less than what someone else could give you, you might be, for the comfort and for the knowledge of knowing that it's a great company to work for, there are some benefits that maybe don't come through in a dollar amount, but they definitely come through in like a life, mental health, and all the rest that comes with being with a really good organization, a good company. So I think that also plays a factor, not just the no state tax. Otherwise, every place with no state tax would be signing their best players to beautiful deals, and it wouldn't matter. But even I guess the Predators to an extent have signed some players to team friendly deals, but at the same time, Ryan Johansson is not a team friendly deal. Okay, I'll do my number 4. I've got Leon Draisaitl. I mean, he's still got 4 years left at $8.5 million, and the guy was the frickin' MVP in 2020 without Connor McDavid. Like,
right.
he is phenomenal. At $8.5 million, there's very few players that are better than he is making less money than him. The only player that I can find is the player that I have at number 3.
Okay.
Other than that, I think that he's the best player in his price bracket, and it seems as though he's only just begun. Like, I think this guy's still getting better.
I love it, and I can't disagree with you at all because I have him at number 2 for that reason.
Okay.
I mean,
all right,
yeah, he's phenomenal. I mean, this guy, essentially, in my opinion, is a top 5 goal scorer in the league as well. I mean, you throw him up there with the Ovies of the league and, the Austin Matthews. I mean, listen, 3 seasons ago, he had 50 goals and I mean, with 50 goals, didn't even really finish in the top 5 of Hart Trophy voting. Like, how does that even happen?
Connor McDavid.
Right? Exactly. That's why, right? So you've got this overshadowing power.
Yeah, he had to do it without Connor. Like, he had to show, okay, Connor McDavid goes down, and I'm still one of the world's best players.
Right. I mean, it's essentially a Malkin Crosby situation we had, a decade ago where Malkin said, okay, well, I can still go out and win a Hart Trophy without Crosby in the lineup.
Absolutely. Okay, so you've got Draisaitl at 2. I've got him at 4. You had Crosby at, I think, 6. And I've got him at 2. So our lists are, we've just got a little bit of a shuffle. I wanted to say this about Crosby's deal. I know he's coming up on number 2 for me. One of the reasons why I look at this deal and go, dang, is he won 2 Stanley Cups with that deal. Like, there's not too many players go and look at their current deal and they have 2 Stanley Cups. I'll give you that. Other than the Tampa Bay Lightning, who just won 2 cups in a row.
Right.
So the fact that he is on he's the best player in the league for, of that deal starting in 13-14, which is this contract. Is he the best player in the league for the first six years of that deal? And then when finally it was like 18-19, maybe 19-20 was when it was like, all right, Connor McDavid is now better than him. But Crosby still keeps, like, even though the Penguins haven't had great playoff success the last 3 seasons, he's still been good in the playoffs, whereas McDavid not so much. So
and I will
there's
tell
that
you this,
factor, right?
If I was building a team today, even at 34, 33 years old, Crosby, I would still take him over McDavid right now.
Wow, that's ballsy.
Just because
I wouldn't.
Because I know what now long term, right? No, absolutely. I would take McDavid because I know he's going to be so good for so much longer. But if I had 1 year, 1 season, I would take Crosby.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. I like it. All right. Who you got sitting at number 3?
So number 3, Barkov and Huberdeau, I had them at a tie. So basically they took up the 4 number 3 spots.
Okay.
So,
okay. I got you. So then my number 3 is Nathan MacKinnon. Maybe he's your number 1.
Okay, yeah. McKinnon didn't make the list for me, unfortunately.
Really? Nathan
I'm
MacKinnon?
Just kidding. No. He's number 1 for me on this list, hands down.
All right. Yep. Making $6.3 million for another 2 years. I mean, he is got to be worth the league maximum. Like, if he was making the league maximum, it would be fine. And he has the 88th highest capped hit in the league.
Yeah, crazy.
That is nuts for what he brings to the table, and how good he has been. Now, he hasn't been. I'll say he's been good, but he hasn't been this good for the entire length of his deal. Sure, I'll give you that. It's really the last 4 years he's been fantastic. The first 2 years of that deal, I guess really it's just the first year of that deal. Then he wasn't the greatest. That 16-17 season, he only had 16 goals in 82 games, and then he goes and rattles off 39, 41, 35, and 20, and that was in far fewer games than what you'd normally be playing. So yeah, I mean, can't argue with that deal. that's the sweetest sweetheart deal that you can find. Yeah, I don't disagree. I mean, that's why he's number 1 on my list. I think, outside of that season, 16-17 was, let's just say, a season to forget with only 22 wins and 82 games. I mean, I don't think anybody on that team was any good.
year, I mean, he still managed to put up some decent
well,
numbers.
It was after that year that he got that personal trainer that he's had ever since, or his like strength and conditioning guy and his nutritionist, whatever. And he says like he can't lose that guy because that guy turned him around.
Right.
He credits a lot of his success to that guy. I don't know what his name is, but.
Yeah, I mean, look, you look at, Landeskog at $7 million, Rantanen at 9.25. It's clear to me that we're going to be talking $12 to $14 million for McKinnon on an extension next year, which is why outside of those two guys I just mentioned at the forward group, there's nobody signed beyond next season. So, or not 2021. I'm talking 22-23 season. There's no one signed beyond that, and even so, the two guys signed to that, that year are basically JT Compher and Tyson Jost, who are, at $3.5 and $2 million. So there's going to be a lot of room. Luckily, Erik Johnson's $6 million cap, it comes off the books. So there's going to be a bit of room for them to use some money here to get him signed long-term. Obviously, he's probably going to come in pretty close to McDavid, if not, might surpass him as far as
just
maybe
because
one of the highest paid players in the league.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. Now, okay, he's your number one. Who is your number two?
So number two was Leon Draisaitl.
Okay.
Yep.
My number one may be the strangest of them all, but I'll explain to you why I have him at number one. Who do you think my number one is?
You know what? Most people, I think, would probably look at it and say, "Oh, you know what? We're going to go with Connor McDavid, right? Because he seems like the easiest person to pick out of the hat."
That's who is my number one, and I'll tell you why.
Yeah. Okay.
Based on what he is able to do and the amount of wins that he produced last year, he was at a 6.8 wins is what his statistics pointed at that he produced by himself, which the next highest is like 5.1. And when that system was created, it was created to have a ceiling of 6 wins for one person because it was thought that no one player could be responsible for more than 6 wins in a year. So it kind of broke the formula, essentially.
The mold.
What he is actually valued at, or what he should be paid if you take the average of the league and based on points per game and what have you, he should be paid about just over $20 million a year.
That's crazy.
And he's making 12.5. So he's about $7.5 million a year underpaid. And for the next 5 years, it's likely that could actually grow over the course of that deal. So, I mean, he's unbelievable. He's on a different chart than anyone else. Like, yes, McKinnon is one of the best players in the league. So is Austin Matthews. So is Leon Draisaitl. So is Sidney Crosby still. But even Sidney Crosby was not this much better than the next guy at the time. Like, there was always who's better, Crosby or Ovechkin? And Ovechkin wasn't that far away because of what Ovechkin could do scoring goals. But Connor McDavid is just, there's no one close. There's no one even in the same stratosphere as Connor McDavid. And I think we're only just beginning to understand how good he is and like how mind-numbing his stats actually are. I mean, we're talking, if you take what he did this last year and put it into perspective of, the average goals per game and being able to like go through time and, look at Gretzky's 5 seasons where he had over 200 points and Lemieux's 199 point season. You put all those together and Connor McDavid had like the 3rd best season in the history of the league.
Yeah,
better than a couple of Gretzky's 200 point seasons. Like, that is how good this year was. And that is when you watch Gretzky, granted, I wasn't old enough to watch Gretzky in the craziness of his 200 point seasons, but you had to be thinking, no one will ever do this again. And you know what? No one will ever score 200 points again unless the game changes drastically. But McDavid is like, for our time, he is doing what Gretzky did. He's putting up those numbers that are like, what? How is this possible? And because of that, there also is that level of like, there's so many factors as to why he is so valuable beyond even what he brings on the ice. I mean, financially and what he does for the game. Like, when you have a LeBron James, a Michael Jordan, like a Tom Brady, the things that it does for your game, the marketability of your game is just, it's not measurable. So he should be paid league max, no doubt about it. Absolutely should be paid league max, and he's not. He's not even close to it. He's 25%. He's 75% of the league max.
I can't argue with you. I mean, this guy definitely should be paid, league max for sure. But to me, because he is the highest paid player in the league, it made it hard for me to put him on the list. Now, again, I can't argue with you wanting to put him on the list or even putting him at number one because, again, how freaking good he was this season at so close to almost 2 points per game, which I never thought I would ever see in my lifetime. Right.
I
mean,
like 160 point season is like, what?
Yeah, I know. You think about it, right? Like when I again, never seen anybody put up 150 points, since the early 90s in a season, but maybe we might actually get that next year.
It's going to be cray next year. Well, and a lot of people talked about that North Division as like, well, we got to play against some of these like teams. I don't know. Like that Pacific Division is going to be so bad, I think, other than Vegas. Like I think that they're going to be everyone's going to be pretty mediocre. I think that he's going to rip that division apart. And then, when you see a team over and over and over again, I think there's an advantage defense, not advantage offense. So the fact that he was able to keep you've seen me 8 times this year. You still can't stop me. Like you still can't figure me out because I'm too good. Like, whereas these teams that see him 3 times or 2 times, or I guess 2 times would be is generally the minimum. You don't even know, you're not used to playing against him at all. So I think that it's only to his advantage to not have to play the same teams every night. Granted, he'll have to play against Tampa Bay. And are there some players that can match up with him a little better? Yeah. But he also gets to play the Red Wings, the Blue Jackets, the Sharks. Like there's lots of bad teams. The Buffalo Sabres. There's lots of teams out there that he is going to feast on. And I'm here for it. I am here for it. Any final thoughts before we close out this episode of the best contracts in the NHL?
Yeah, now what I will say, when we talk about McDavid in next season, I'm excited to see, because of what Winnipeg was able to do to him defensively and only keep him to 4 points in 4 games, right? I mean, we'll see if other teams try to emulate that, or if McDavid throws up a giant middle finger and says, I'm still going to go out and put up 150 points. See you later. So,
I'm here for a 200-point season. That's what I'm going for.
Dude, love it.
All right. Well, that'll be another show. The predictions for the year. Well, I'm sure we'll get to that real soon. It's crazy. We're only like 1 month out from training camp, so things are going to start moving here again. And I'm getting excited for it. We'll definitely have some more top 10 lists out here for you soon. And until then, find us on Twitter at OT Hockey Talk, and we'll hit you guys soon.